Skype is...
Hold on a second.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. 1 second, please. I forgot to shut off the show.
Well, maybe I don't want you shutting off the show.
What? But hey, listen. I got 2 things I got to ask.
All right.
Oh, well, actually, the first one's a complaint.
Complain away, my friend.
Okay. How are the people who are going to watch Discovery ID and Kenda going to vote?
That's a great question. I kind of like to think that they're gonna vote with us, but I think Kenda is apolitical. I think he's too world weary to care one way or the other, right? I mean, don't you get that sense?
I know which way I'm voting.
Well, I know which way you're voting too.
Right. Oh, by the way, and the other point is that my wife assures me we're not going to lose the house. We've never missed a mortgage payment.
That's good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I wouldn't want you to lose the house. All right, so Jeff,
because I'd have to come in and live with you in March.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Couch is there, buddy. Anytime you need the couch, you can fly out to Minnesota to sack out here anytime.
Thank you.
All right, so a couple of things about I brought Jeff on to talk a little bit about what happened in Pittsburgh because we talked to Selena about it. Look, I mean, this is a horrific attack.
Yes.
It's the type of anti-Semitism that I think we'd hoped had largely disappeared, but clearly hasn't, obviously. And I think that anybody who's been paying attention to the fever swamps understands that it's been bubbling around for some time. This guy apparently was a denizen of those fever swamps. How safe do you feel?
I was a member of GAB, and I didn't even know that it was supposed to be an alt-right place.
Oh, were you on Gab? I didn't realize you were on Gab. Yeah, I never went over to Gab.
It's like Facebook. You make friends with who you want to make friends with.
Right. Well, it's like Twitter. It's like Twitter except without speech controls on it. And I get that. I don't blame Gab for this, by the way. I mean,
no, but everybody else is.
I know. I understand that. It's not the platform isn't the issue. It's the hatred that's the issue. Yeah, he's a nut job, but I mean, he's not the kind of nut job. He's not the kind of guy like Jared. What's his name? Loeffner, the guy. Right, the guy who did the Arizona shooting at
he did the movie theater, right?
That was a different guy. The guy I'm talking about. He's another nutcase, though. I mean,
right, they're all crazy.
Those guys are crazy. This guy, I mean, he's clearly not right in the head, but he's not disconnected from reality crazy. He's just he's filled with hatred.
Right.
I mean, as a Jewish man, how safe do you feel in going to your synagogue, and being in your community?
Well, I feel different than most Jews because I feel worried because I'm a conservative. and
fair enough.
Actually, I'm not joking. Okay.
Yeah.
I actually had a big blow up at my synagogue a couple of weeks ago because they invited as a speaker an anti-Trump reporter from the New York Times, and I asked, well, why don't you have somebody from the other side? So, yeah, I mean, from that point of view, yes, I'm scared. Otherwise, I mean, Ed, this isn't meant as a complaint, but I've been facing anti-Semitism in my life.
Yep.
There was, when I was going into the city every day and I wore a yarmulke, that's where Yid with Lid came from.
Right.
There would always be somebody giving me a dirty look or saying something nasty, or, you'd hear, hey, Jew. Things like that. I mean, I've never been beaten up. Thank God.
No, but that's disturbing, right? I mean, it's meant to be disturbing. It's meant to intimidate you.
But no, it isn't disturbing. As a matter of fact, it's probably why my original handle on everything was Yid with Lid.
Yep.
It was my way of saying like that.
Oh, that's more of an Italian thing, isn't
it? Well, you know what? I tell my Italian friends that Jewish mothers and Italian mothers are the same. They just use different gestures. So
I think you're right about that.
But the thing is that the way the media has been covering it has been very insulting to the Jews, at least to this Jew.
So tell me how so?
Well, I happen to agree with you, and you agree with me, that the only person that really can be blamed for this thing is the idiot with the gun.
Right.
Okay. Although I've seen posts today that blame the AR-15.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't realize that an AR-15 has a mind of its own and dragged the guy to the synagogue. But besides that, all these comments about Trump, Trump's verbiage, and his rhetoric it caused people to do things. You know what? I don't think Trump's, and I'm going to say something that I don't really mean, but if you're going to blame anybody for rhetoric, it should be Obama. Obama had nothing to do with it also.
Right. No, I get, you're making an argument here. I get that. So proceed.
But the thing is that no one recognizes that for the 8-year period of the Obama presidency, and indeed, I checked my posts for the last 10 years, the Democratic Party is the anti-Semitic party. And Barack Obama is the most anti-Semitic president in my lifetime. Okay? And you want to talk buzzwords, first of all, I didn't know that if you criticize a caravan, you're a racist. I mean, when we had kids, the first car we had was a Dodge Caravan. But anyway, Obama used to say things like, well, if you want to, we're fighting for the Iran deal against those rich banker types in the cities. That wasn't a buzzword?
Right.
There were people who tweeted out, they were in a meeting with Obama about the Iran deal. And they tweeted out, he's saying that Jews got us into the Iraq war. I mean, the only other person I know who really says that and believes that is Pat Buchanan.
Yeah.
He's an anti-Semite.
Right.
He if you look at who he honored, Desmond Tutu, who said that Jews think they own God, Mary Robinson, who ran an anti-Semitic convention for the UN that was so bad that Colin Powell walked out of it.
Yeah.
When he was Secretary of State.
I remember that, yeah.
You just go through, and it's too long of a record. But don't start blaming Trump. Trump is probably the most pro-Jewish. I'm not talking about pro-Israel. And with Obama, I'm not talking about anti-Israel because he was anti-Israel. But I'm talking about Jewish president in my lifetime.
And it's interesting.
And how can you argue with a guy who every grandchildren he has from Jewish law is Jewish? Because even Eric's wife is Jewish.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Eric's wife's mother is Jewish.
So gotcha.
Go through lineage.
Yeah, it's matrilineal, right? Yeah, Judaism is matrilineal. So yeah, no, right. that makes sense. Absolutely.
So you're saying he hates his grandchildren?
Right. I mean, that's just silly to me. I mean, again, this could have happened 2 years ago, and nobody would be blaming Obama for it. Nor should they have been. And you've said that too. Nor should they have been. But I don't even know where the idea that Trump is anti-Semitic comes from.
I do.
Well, okay, so where?
Do you remember that tweet with the picture of Hillary and the sheriff's badge?
Oh, yeah.
And the money?
Yeah.
But you know what? If you look at, for example, the sheriff's badge of Suffolk County, New York, where I live,
yeah, a lot of them are
the badge.
A lot of them are 6-point stars. A lot of sheriff's badges are 6-point stars. Yeah.
But Emily Jasinski this morning on Fox News said, "Well, look, he hired Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a loudmouth. I don't like a lot of his politics, but he ain't anti-Semitic." I'm the first one to scream at people who are anti-Semitic.
And here's the thing that. Because
you're anti-Semitic, but not as bad as Jazz. I'm joking.
Is that because I don't invite you on the show often enough? Is that what we're talking about here, Jeff?
No, not at all.
No, here's the thing, though. This goes back years. When I first started doing this, the Ron Paul crowd, there were some real anti-Semites in that Ron Paul crowd.
Ron Paul is an anti-Semite.
Yeah, arguably, yeah.
Arguably, he wrote newsletters.
It's true, right? Yes, he did. He wrote newsletters talking about the Jews, and so it's not as though anti-Semitism isn't in politics. It is.
Yes. There's anti-everything in politics.
But it's been mostly a fringe. You know, you
But
can argue
you know
about
what?
Buchanan, I guess, but I mean, even Buchanan's a fringe.
Well, he's out of a job a lot of times.
You're right, yeah.
You know, but look at who was it? Was it Kamala Harris who, when there was a Catholic judge getting confirmed, she wondered if her religion was going to prevent her from being fair?
Right, yep. Oh,
come on.
Feinstein, too. Feinstein said the same thing. The dogma lives
And by the
loudly in
way,
you.
let me point out, Feinstein is not Jewish. She is Russian Orthodox, just to let you know. I don't want to get blamed for that.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I didn't know that. I guess I never thought about it one way or the other. But
I got enough problems.
You know,
I got Al Franken and half of Geraldo.
Okay, then. You know, so the where do we go after this Pittsburgh massacre? You know, even before that, I'll talk about something I saw shortly before we started the show, which was an interview that the rabbi there, Rabbi Jeffrey Myers, did with Alison Camerota on CNN, and he said, you know, I think that he talked very, very glowingly, you know, in a way, I guess, about Donald Trump's visit there. Said that he was, you know, very warm and personable, and showed a side that the American people really hasn't seen, and talked, I think, movingly about his meeting with Donald Trump. That
was a very rabbinic thing to do.
Well, first off, very true. It is a very rabbinic thing to do, and it's you know, healing is a very rabbinic thing to do, and he's looking for ways to heal, and I think that's not really a surprise, right?
Yes, but I wrote something yesterday that I think you read.
Yes.
That the coverage of this whole thing with the Jewish group that was supposedly sent, well, they did send Trump a letter not to come, has been totally wrong. First of all, if you go to the group's homepage, and I don't think anybody in the media has except, well, me, its mission is to disrupt the Trump government. It's not anything Jewish. Jewish is a name, okay? It's like me selling hair pieces, okay? It talks about electing Democrats. It talks about stopping Trump. It doesn't talk about anything Jewish. And the reason is that the way Jewish theology looks at it, okay? Mm-hmm. You know that whole thing about created in God's image in Genesis?
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't mean that we all look the same and have the same DNA, because then we'd be from Tennessee. Okay?
Okay.
But what it means is that God acts a certain way, and we're supposed to act in a godly way.
Yes.
Well, this week, actually, the portion we read is about the death of Sarah, Abraham's wife.
Yes.
Okay. And it starts off with Abraham giving himself the bris. Okay, he had to do it for himself when he was 99 years old.
Yeah.
And on the worst day of pain, God came to visit him and comfort him. And then later in the chapter, when Sarah dies, God goes to Isaac to comfort, because he's bereaved.
Right.
So what it teaches us is that to be godly, you visit the sick and you comfort the bereaved.
Right.
And that's what Trump was doing.
Right.
So any rabbi that disagrees with that is really losing what his theology is all about.
Yeah, he's losing sight of the overall
yeah.
mission.
The other thing about the group is that Judaism is a very grassroots religion. I mean, in Christianity, the rules of theology, they come from the Vatican, right?
Well, in Catholicism, it does. You know,
in Catholicism.
Yeah, there's a lot more hierarchy in some Christian religions, including Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity. Right. But there are others that are congregational, and so they kind of do their own thing. Yeah.
In Judaism, and the tradition's been that the decisions are all made by the local rabbi.
Yep.
Okay. So it wasn't for the group to say who should come and pay basically a shiva call, a morning call.
Mm-hmm.
It was up to the rabbi. They were stepping on the rabbi. Well, first they were stepping on God because they were telling somebody that they couldn't, visit the sick and comfort the mourner, and then they were visiting the rabbi, whose decision is who comes to visit.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. But none of them. What the frustrating part about this whole thing is none of the media covers that. None of the media decides to dive in, because it's easy just to say, "Hey, look, there's some people that don't like Trump." Well, you know what? I can't think of a president where there weren't some people that didn't like him.
Right.
I didn't go to AIPAC because I didn't want to see Obama there.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's you have to have some room for that, right? I mean, there's got to be some room for, I don't necessarily like the guy, but when it comes, in a way, this topic, it's not, I mean, this has nothing to do with the shooting, but it has to do also with the, the stuff about athletes that won't go to the White House when they're invited there for their championships. And this started, by the way, with Obama. It didn't start with Trump.
Right.
But I mean, there's a difference between the president as a politician and the president as the head of state, right? And what Trump was doing in Pittsburgh was as a head of state. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, that's what Obama did it. George Bush did it. Bill Clinton,
and he reads Selena's columns and wanted to visit her hometown.
Probably that too, right? But I mean, it's an inability to distinguish between the two, and the presidency is like that. There's two
Right.
categories of functions. One is as head of state. The other is as a political player.
Right. Like, for example, in Britain, it's broken up. You have the Queen,
who's the head of state.
You have the Prime Minister,
who's the head of the government. That's right.
Right. And in Israel, it's the Prime Minister and the President,
has
absolutely no power except greeting people and going to funerals.
Right. Ireland just elected the president. It's the same thing in Ireland, right?
Really?
Because the president, the Uachtaran, has no authority. He's the ceremonial head of state. It's the Taoiseach, the prime minister, that has the authority there. And so yeah, in the United States, it's combined.
Gets my goat, Ed. Why do all of these non-Jews decide what's anti-Semitic? I'm sorry. But now, for example, if you criticize George Soros, you hate Jews.
Yeah.
George Soros hates Jews.
Well, I don't want to go there, but look, if you're
going to be saying,
if you're going to be
Trump has never been an anti-Semite.
If you're going to be in the political process, then you're fair game for being criticized. Look, if they were just hauling out some random guy and creating conspiracy theories about the guy, creating an Emmanuel Goldstein for those people who remember their George Orwell in 1984, that would be that would tend to hint at some anti-Semitism. But George Soros is a guy who actually is involved in politics, and his money goes into a lot of different places. Now, I would say this, that you should actually make sure that the money, that whatever money that's going to this caravan effort came from George Soros before you just assume it did.
Absolutely.
But
for example, there's a Jewish group, supposed pseudo-Jewish group called J Street.
Yes.
That if you ask Alan Dershowitz, liberal, he would say that it's not pro-Israel and it's not pro-peace. Something I discovered, because they forgot to erase it years ago, was that George Soros funded that organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so you go through this, but really it gets back to who decides what is anti-Semitic.
Yeah. Maybe what we need to do is we need to stop making assumptions along those lines too. I mean, if somebody's coming out and says, I hate Jews, then they're anti-Semitic, and it's pretty easy to
bingo.
That's pretty easy to figure out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this guy was not hiding it. This piece of shit, scumbag that shot up a synagogue full of peaceful people because he's too freaking cowardly to engage properly in the political process. I'm sorry, I'm editorializing here.
But you know something, Ed?
he made it clear. Yeah, go ahead.
I started later than you. The way I started making friends with the bigger bloggers was that I was always the one to defend people when they were falsely accused of being anti-Semitic.
Right. I remember that.
You know, John Hawkins, longtime buddy.
Yep.
Ann Coulter, even Rush.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just pisses me off because it makes that term should make people sick. Just like racist should make people. If I was, God forbid, ever called a racist for real, it would turn my stomach.
Yeah, well, it's happened to me, and it has turned my stomach. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that.
But no, you know what? If it was real, it would turn my stomach. And I can't believe anyone would call you anything that was anti-anything, because, you know.
One of these days, I'll tell you that story, but I won't tell it on air.
Okay.
It's not necessary. It just those types of accusations based on nothing but politics is what happens, and it's disappointing and it's disturbing when it happens. But what it does is it's like that joke meme that's going around with the children's book. It says everybody I don't like is Hitler. I mean, it dilutes the meaning of what anti-Semitism is. There is real anti-Semitism. There are people who get targeted because they're Jewish, and it happens every day. That's what we should be focusing on, not whether or not you criticize George Soros makes you anti-Semitic. I mean, that's just nonsense.
And that's another thing that pisses me off. And I flip down at Republicans and Democrats when they use the term Nazi or Hitler in an inappropriate name.
Yeah.
Wait, I have an aunt that died a couple of weeks ago. She had a tattoo on her arm.
Yeah.
Because she was in Auschwitz.
Yeah, wow.
I've never made anybody put a tattoo on their arm.
No.
Trump never put people in ovens or gas chambers. That's a Nazi.
That's a Nazi. Anti-Semites are the people who are doing the stuff that we're talking about, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So I've got a question for you that's completely unrelated, but I want to ask it of you because it's coming from the chat room, and I like to make sure that we do this. And it's an interesting question. And this is Robert Cruz, who wants to know if Rabbi Talushkin's books are a reliable guide to Jewish thought. He's got two of his Rabbi Talushkin's books. Maybe I'm saying the name wrong. Talushkin?
I will answer with a story.
Okay.
This old Jewish man was stuck on a desert island for 10 years. He gets rescued. And he goes to the rescuers. Listen, before I leave, let me show you what I've done. So he takes him all the way to a clearing, and there are 3 huts, 3 little houses he built. He goes, what's that? He goes, well, that hut is my house. That's where I live. He goes, what about that one? Oh, that's my synagogue. And he goes, what about that one? He goes, oh, that's the synagogue I'd never set foot in. It's really true that you put 2 Jews, you get 3 opinions. There's an expression, and it's from Deuteronomy, where it says the Torah is not in heaven. Okay? It's meant to be interpreted. And like I said, everything is grassroots.
Right.
For those who have never read the Talmud, the whole darn thing is an argument. It's the house of this versus the house of this. This one says there was an argument between the 2 houses whether on Hanukkah you start with 8 and go down, and do you start with 1 and go up. And I'm not kidding. And they all had religious reasons for it. But so that's my answer. You have to read it and see what you feel comfortable with.
Well, there you go. Okay, so but definitely would you at least say that Talushkin is within the mainstream or within a mainstream?
I've never read him. I got to tell you.
There you go. So,
but unless it's telling you to eat pork and work on Saturday,
right.
And beat up your neighbor, because there's a story about Rabbi Hillel, one of the famous rabbi.
Yep.
Who someone said to him, a skeptic said, okay, I'll convert if you can teach me the Torah while standing on 1 foot. And Rabbi Hillel lifted his foot and said, anything that you don't like, don't do to your neighbor. Now go read. The rest is commentary.
There you go.
I would also urge him to read Rabbi Steinsaltz. I happen to like his stuff. Especially, I like his definition of what makes a good Jew, which is a good Jew is anybody who wants his grandchildren to be Jewish. But you know what I mean? It's not.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Any faith. It's all. I go by the and this is in Christianity too. The story of Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
It's not where you are on the ladder. It's whether you're going up
or going down. Right. Yes.
and that's it. There is no Jewish police. Well, except for our wives.
Yeah, whatever your wife says, I think is that's a key thing in Christian marriages too. I just want to let you know. I think there's commonality there between those two things.
Well, actually, in that article I told you about, one of the things I wrote about is that all religions believe in happy wife, happy life.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to have to wrap things up because I got to get to Twyla Brace. I did finally get a phone number for her, so I'm going to go ahead and give her a buzz right now.